Good morning, everyone. My name is Ileana Soto-Welty, and welcome to the Orange County ACEs Aware Trauma-Informed Network of Care, Equity and Healing series. This is our fourth session, and we're really excited today to have one of our partners, CHOC, present. And we have Dr. Sharonne Herbert, who is the Belonging, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategist and community builder and board certified psychologist at Children's Hospital of Orange County. In her role, she has contributed to the organization by developing and implementing a BDEI strategic plan and unconscious bias models and trainings, deploying inclusive processes and consulting in the areas of leadership and belonging. She's passionate about creating high-performing teams, and Dr. Herbert also values partnership, empathy, compassion, and authenticity as critical elements to integrating BDEI into the overall culture. The goal of her work is to leverage these foundational principles to help everyone appreciate differences and engage with one another in a positive, mindful way to create an environment where everyone thrives. So today she's going to be sharing with us on how to create a mindfulness practice towards cultural consciousness. And it's going to be a very interactive session. So if you go to pollev.com and then you type in Sharonne Herb 001, then you'll be able to participate in the very interactive activities that we have ahead of us. And I'll pass it over to you, Sharonne.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I appreciate the very, very warm welcome, and I'm excited to engage with you. So there are going to be many opportunities that you all will have to engage with either in the poll, or I'll ask some questions. Please don't hesitate to unmute yourselves, and we'll get started. So I realized I didn't share with sound, which is really important. Okay, y'all. So what we'll do is today, as Ileana had said, we are going to really focus on how we move in the direction towards cultural consciousness. And as you all have spoken, I'm sure, much about during this series, it's all about ACEs, and we've talked a little bit about trauma-informed care. We will briefly breeze over that, and then it's going to lead us to what I'd like to talk mostly about, which is multicultural orientation, which entails three aspects: cultural humility, cultural opportunities, and cultural comfort. Now, we're going to really focus on cultural humility and talk about bias. That's where you'll have opportunity to do some engaging. However, I love questions, so please don't hesitate to interrupt. And hopefully, Ileana, you will tell me, because I'm not going to be great at monitoring the chat. And please raise your hand, all kinds of things. I'd love to hear from you. So if you all are ready, let's go ahead and get started. As I had said, first part is all about ACEs. You all are quite familiar with this lovely questionnaire, and we know about the prevalence of folks who have at least one ACE is 60%, 3 or more ACEs is at 25%, and 4 or more ACEs is 16%. We also know there's been a huge shift in how we are approaching folks who have experienced trauma with this trauma-informed care lens. So if you're not familiar, one of the things that it shifts the focus on is us talking to folks in this way and thinking about it, like, what's wrong with you, to what's happened to you. And it also seeks to understand several things. So we, as providers who are using trauma-informed care, we're really trying to understand the impact of trauma and the paths for recovery and healing. This also gives us an opportunity to recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma, as well as taking all of that information and then using it in our practice. But one of the most important aspects of using trauma-informed care is that it helps us avoid re-traumatization, which is extremely important. We know when you use trauma-informed care, it impacts so much. So it improves health outcomes, treatment adherence, engagement. And another piece of it, I'm sure you all know, but it impacts our provider and staff wellness. So using trauma-informed care can help us as providers or any staff, in addition to reducing excess costs or avoidable care. But one thing I also wanted to highlight is that it acknowledges that we as people in healthcare in any fashion, so in a healthcare institution on care teams, that we really need to seek out a of like the patients or clients, however you refer to your customer base, the life situation. It also, so SAMHSA has put together, and this has been adapted by the Center of Healthcare Strategies, some core of trauma-informed approach to care that's necessary to transform any healthcare setting. And as you can see, there are 6 main principles. One is about like how we feel safe, whether it's psychologically or physically. This notion of like building and maintaining trust. So through transparency, having people who have lived experiences that really helps with like the delivery of care. Being able to collaborate and power share amongst whether you are a person who is a provider and the patient or family. And then acknowledging the strengths of all of the individuals and utilizing that to enhance the care. But what we're going to talk about mostly today is all about humility and the responsiveness to it. So this is your first opportunity, and hopefully it's working out for you, because I want to hear about what you know about multicultural orientation. So as you can see, and hopefully it pops up on your screen, A is, MCO, is this like cultural competence? B, I know the definitions to multicultural and orientation, but I'm not really sure what MCO is. C, I have seen this term before, but I'm not too familiar. D, I have some working knowledge of MCO. And E, if this is you, please come up and present, because step aside, Sharonne, let me inform you about MCO. Okay, so it's working for someone. And if you're struggling, please let me know. Okay. Fabulous. I'll give folks about 10 more seconds. And if you're having a hard time, please let me know. And I'll give more time. But in general, it seems like people aren't too familiar with it. We have some folks have some working knowledge. So hopefully people, no matter where you are on the spectrum, you will be willing to share your general knowledge or the fact that you're just kind of learning about it. So, okay, now MCO. So multicultural orientation comes from the therapy world. And in essence, when we think about this, we think about theoretical orientation. And, the primary purpose of processing and using a theoretical orientation in the world that I came from is to organize how we understand people. So that is their personality, the presenting issue, their life circumstances, as well as it guides us through that therapy process. MCO refers to how we understand and value diversity. And it is quite concerned with how cultural worldviews, values, beliefs of a client, or it could be patient or with whom you work, and the therapist or provider interacts and influences one another so we can co-create a relational experience that is healing. So it consists of 3 pillars, which are cultural humility. You've already seen this, the way of being, how we carry oneself, cultural opportunities, which is those moments where you have an opportunity to explore one's identity, and cultural comfort, the way in which we understand ourselves in these moments when there are opportunities to dive in. And it's really important to note, which is where we're going to spend most of our time, that cultural humility is the crux of all of this. And it's that overarching virtue and bedrock, and that will help us develop a very, very strong multicultural orientation. Whether you're in healthcare or if you're not, it's invaluable. So I have a question for you all, and whoever feels willing to unmute themselves will be great. What do you know about the differences between cultural competence and humility? Or put it in the chat, which somebody can read to me.
Competency, I'm just going to hazard a guess.
Yes, thank
sorry,
you.
let me start my video.
Oh, there you are. How do you pronounce your name?
Rima Nashashibi.
Oh, thank you, Rima.
Sure. So I'm going to hazard a guess. So if you're familiar and understand cultural sensitivity, diversity, and inclusion, then you're competent. However, if you understand it and you're competent, you can use it through, you can either use humility or you can be arrogant about it.
Okay.
For example, let's say I come from a cultural background, I understand, then I'm more sensitive to it, and I treat everyone with love and compassion because I understand what people go through. And I don't assume, I just treat everybody with love and compassion, not knowing what everybody's going through, whether it's through race, ethnicity, religion, anything. So I'll stop here.
Oh, you don't have to, but that sounds wonderful. So you're talking about some basic tenets that you espouse when you're meeting with people. And it's really, you're talking a little bit about cultural humility to some extent. And so let's hear, I have a little quick video that I'd love to play, and then we can talk a little bit more about what people are thinking and how cultural competence is different than cultural humility. So Rima, thank you. First one out, and I appreciate it. Hopefully it gives other people some more courage to speak up too. Let me know if you cannot hear it.
Cultural competency and cultural humility. You may have heard these terms before, possibly in the context of healthcare settings, and not quite understood what they meant. Let's go over what these terms mean and how they apply to everyday life. To be culturally competent is to learn about other cultures, control your biases, and adapt your behaviors and communication style considering the background of people around you. The goal of cultural competency is effective and informed interaction across various cultures. At face value, cultural competency sounds ideal, but it may actually lead us to rely on generalizations about certain groups rather than recognizing the uniqueness of each individual. We also have to ask ourselves, is it realistic or even possible for people to learn everything about other cultures and become completely bias-free? That's where cultural humility comes in. To be culturally humble is to be aware of social power imbalances, respect other people's values and beliefs, and continuously reflect on your own biases. With cultural humility, there's no expectation that you memorize everything there is to know about other groups. Instead, it's a lifelong process of asking yourself how your own biases might impact the way you treat and understand others, alongside work to minimize that impact. Cultural competency is a goal, while cultural humility is a mindset. Let's go over a few ways to practice cultural humility in our daily lives. Recognize that no culture is superior to another. Become comfortable with reflecting on and acknowledging mistakes you've made. Be honest when you're not sure about something. Learn about other cultures with the awareness that you'll never reach perfect understanding. Ask the people in your life if you can have open discussions and hold each other accountable during your learning journey. The great thing about cultural humility is that it acknowledges that no one can get it right all the time. In fact, a key component of cultural humility is being open about what we haven't learned yet. Although it can feel really uncomfortable to admit when we're wrong or don't know something, that vulnerability leaves room for us to continuously learn, grow, and promote equity and inclusion in our communities.
Okay, so what are the differences now after Rima shared and from this video? What did you pick up on?
I would add, if I may, that competency, it really takes probably more of an intentional effort, whereas humility can be something that can result from what that posture has been toward making that effort or not. And so, yeah, they're very different things. It's also something very challenging because, you know, in our cultural context, when someone doesn't accept that they may need cultural competence, they might still think that they are humble people, because of how humility is defined in different contexts.
Sure.
So that's the challenging part, I think.
It sounds, and do you pronounce your name Adriana?
It's Adriana, but you can say
Adriana.
Adriana's fine.
Adriana, no, thank you.
Mhm.
Adriana, I think what you're talking about, there's like a balance of having, you know, both, right? So we need some general knowledge, but that knowledge, and also we need to continue to find ways to be okay with the things that we don't know so that we can continue to learn as we're working with other individuals.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think the thought I was having as I stepped into this group, which was such a pleasure to be here because it's such a small group and people that I know and love, and just thinking about how amazing it is for those of us that are engaged in that process. But then the challenge is, you know, when we have to interact with those that don't even need or don't even believe that they need to be engaged in that process. And so that's where the challenge is. I think that's kind of what I was getting to.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. So like folks who are here are like, okay, like this is something that we need to be thinking about, and how do we engage with people who don't see the value of either? One of like gaining some general like knowledge, however, not taking it to another step, which is really being culturally humble. And we'll talk about that, what that definition is, and how that can really push the work that we're doing with whomever we're working. Thank you, Adriana. Excellent. Okay, so in addition to you know, what Adriana was saying, as well as this video, we just to highlight a few pieces is that competence suggests like an end goal, like a finish line, whereas humility is a little bit more flexible. It's saying like, oh gosh, life is ever evolving, or like the work that we're doing with the folks that we work with, whom we work, it's ever changing and it's highly contextual. And we know when we think about work, effective work with cultural differences, it entails two things, which are what one knows or how to do something, what one, like how one manages what they don't know and or how to do it. It's so important to consider that. And then when we think about humility and competency and the differences, the other piece is competency suggests I'm going to focus on one identity. I'm not going to take into consideration, like humility does, of there's so many identities that we carry in any given situation, and that there's an intersectionality between those. And so what it considers is that if I have many identities, those identities are affiliated with privileges and oppressions that are interlocking, woven together, very fluid. And it's always important to consider that when we think about that. So when we think about cultural humility, I'm sure many of you have heard of this term before, and cultural humility is housed in the subdomain under humility. And it entails two different aspects. So there's the intrapersonal aspect of it, which is all about like capturing our own accurate view of oneself. And what that really means is, how do I understand myself culturally? What are my assumptions? What are my attitudes? What are my values and beliefs? And as well as what we'll talk extensively about, what are my biases? What are my like limitations, if you will? What are my strengths? And then the interpersonal aspect of it is all about being like other oriented, as opposed to being self-centered. The way Tervalon and Marie Garcia describe a culture of humility, and this has been out for almost nearly 25 years, is that it is a lifelong process. To Adriana's point, we want to be working with people who are like, I'm continually learning and like reflecting on myself, as well as critiquing myself. And then a second part of this entails assessing any type of power imbalance, and really trying to mitigate those power imbalances, especially when you're a person who is in a leadership role, or you are a person that someone is seeking treatment from. They see you as someone who has power, and you do. And then the last part of it, so the third piece of it, is development of like mutually respectful relationships and partnerships. What cultural humility does is it shifts the focus about other people. Again, that would be competence, and it focuses on that self-awareness and acknowledges that we all have. I, in this moment, have many perspectives that I carry, but each one of those things that I'm bringing in, the lens that I carry, has assumptions and prejudices, and then I need to own up to that every time I walk into this space. It's space that I'm in here with you, and when I'm off this call and go to a next call, that it's all the same. I bring those assumptions and prejudices, and the core of this process of cultural humility is a deliberate reflection of our own values and biases. So when I talk, oh, we're going to get into biases, well, why don't we go ahead and get started on that? I'm going to make you work because I've been doing a lot of talking. And so I'm going to take a little, not that much of a break, but I'm going to read a few words. I want you to remember as many words as you can, and no, you can't screenshot this, okay? So I'm going to read some words. It's only going to be on there. It's going to be there very quickly. And then I'm going to ask you to do a quick poll. So here we go. And spider, feelers, web, fly, poison, slimy, crawl, bee, wing, bug, small, bite, fright, wasp, creepy. Okay, not going to give you a lot of time. Hold on to it. Can't write anything down. So when you hear the word bias, what is the first word that comes to mind? This is your time to get back into your poll. And if there's like you have multiple words, that's fine. You can submit multiple responses. I just love to hear where folks are in terms of their own thought process around bias. Okay, we got creepy, prejudice. This is all about what your thoughts are when you hear the word bias. This is not about that list. Remember that, y'all. Prejudice, blinders. Something about leaning towards, I'm assuming. Not sure. Ignorance. Something came up. One-sided. Hate. What's the other word? Colonization. Blinders. Open. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds to put some other words. Closed. So we've opened, closed, hate, blinders. And if you've ever seen one of these, in essence, we haven't had people say the same thing, but when the words get larger, minded, so maybe closed-minded, I'm assuming is on there, it means that multiple people have had the same response. So what I'm seeing, in addition to the other words that we initially talked about, you had stigma, injustice, oppression, colonization. All of these words like have this kind of negative connotation, and I'm here to talk to you about, yes, it can have significant impact on many things, and bias at its basic level has no negative or positive valence. So let's talk about bias, or what I like to call our mind bugs. And mind bugs are, this term really comes from the computer science world. It was associated with like mental arithmetic habits that would malfunction when they were applied to situations in which they weren't intended. And so Mahazrin Banaji and Anthony Greenwald, they had extended this term to reflect some ingrained habits of thought that lead to errors in how we perceive, remember, reason, and make decisions. And we've also learned a little bit about just hidden bias mind bugs, which in essence, we know that this results from mental processes that are associated with how we all learn about the world. And we know that this is also guided by this guides, our behavior without us being aware. And sometimes people are like, yeah, that's not true. There's no way that I don't know what's happening with like my behavior. But let's be real. There are situations, if you're a person who has the ability to drive, I know I'm listening, I'm rocking out to music in the car. I might get distracted by what's happening. I might be rubbernecking. And all of a sudden I notice that I'm coming up really close on a car. My brain does not say, hey, Sharonne, I think that you might hit this car. You might want to press the brake. No, what happens is my body just automatically does it for survival's sake. And that is exactly how biases work. Now let's take a break from this. And now this is where you can go into the poll everywhere and put in any words that you remember from that previous list. Let's see how well you remember that list. I'll give folks like 30 more seconds. Okay, you got 15 seconds left. Keep getting in there. Okay, last 5, I don't see any changes. I'm gonna take a peek at this. Excellent. Great, okay. Thank you all so much for participating in that. So if you were a person who said any of the words that are associated with trees, you thought those were on the list, they actually were not on the list. And now I'd like to use the reaction feature that's part of Zoom. So what I'd like people to do is raise your hand. I'm gonna ask you 4 different questions related to bug and insect. So if you can, it's at the bottom. If you're not familiar with Zoom, it's at the bottom of the screen, reactions, and then there it should say raise your hand or raise hand. So how many of you thought that bug and insect were not on the list? Raise your hand. Okay, it seems like nobody's raised their hand. Now, put your hand down if I don't see it, but put your hand down. How many of you thought only insect was on the list? I think this feature works. Okay, what about just only bug was on the list? There we go. Thank you. Beautiful. Okay, what about that you thought bug and insect were on the list? Okay, a few of you. Okay, I see. I just saw an actual hand. Beautiful, thank you. Okay, go ahead and put your hands down. Okay, another person. Excellent. So, what if I told you only bug was on that list? So for the folks who were brave enough to say, I thought both, or I thought insect was on the list, why do you think that we thought insect was also on the list? And feel free to unmute yourself. I love hearing people's voices.
Because they're the same thing.
And be bug, spider.
Yep, so we're making associations. Okay, any other thoughts people have?
Right, my thought is they're the same thing.
Yeah. Exactly. Thank you both. So in essence, our minds are automatic association machines. When we encounter various things like words, complex ideas, images, we're constantly trying to make connections. The problem with it is that it gives us false alarms. And so happens is that we misremember or we inaccurately remember things that just didn't happen. And what we would call this in my world are memory mind bugs. So let's try something else. Oops, I think this is, I'm not sure what that's related to. So why don't you all each year you're gonna have 3 questions. Each year, do more people in the US die from answer A or B? So the first one is murder or diabetes. Sorry.
Diabetes.
Okay, you're screaming. You're shouting over there. Okay. I don't know if that's the right answer. We'll find out. Okay. What about murder or suicide?
Suicide.
I love it. Oh, this is so great. I feel like I'm like actually in session. It's so wonderful. Thank you, Rima, for making my day. Okay, now let's move on to the last one. Car accidents or abdominal cancer?
Abdominal cancer.
Okay, what else? Let's see. Okay, beautiful. I think people have filled it all out. So now, let's go through all of these. Most folks, it seems, actually, I think 100% of you all had chosen diabetes. Most, I think 75, 80% chose suicide. A couple of folks had chosen murder. And it was about 50-50, car accidents and abdominal cancer. So the first one is diabetes. The second one is suicide. And the last one, we got a little stuck there. It's actually abdominal cancer. So now I'm curious, why do you think we, including myself, chose car accidents instead of abdominal cancer?
What's your question again?
Why do you think we are more inclined? And we actually, this is the first time I've ever had 50% for both, but why is it that we were more inclined to choose car accidents as opposed to abdominal cancer? Yeah, Rima.
Well, I knew it wasn't because I'm in the child abuse, human trafficking field. So I have stats on suicide.
Yeah.
I was with the Patient Safety Movement Foundation, so I know stats on diabetes and abdominal cancer. But it's because we see car accidents all the time. We witness, we see them. We know people who've been victimized and killed through car accidents.
Yep.
So we're more apt to choose that than things we really don't see.
Yeah, very well, very, very well said. Anybody else have anything else to add to that? Oh, okay. So she nailed it. So in essence, we make decisions based on available information. And again, sometimes it's wrong. This is the way in which these are availability mind bugs. So again, another way in which we make decisions based on information that could be completely inaccurate. And part of it is because our minds are really effective. So our brains are so efficient. And I have a question for you. You can either unmute yourself or you can put it into the chat. How many bits of information do you think our brain processes in any given second?
Biases. Ask that.
That's random. You can guess. It doesn't matter. You know.
How many
bits of information through all of our senses? I know. I'm making your brain work a little bit before lunch. I'm so sorry. Let me see if I can pull the chat up here. Millions, too many. Hundreds of thousands. Okay. Millions, thousands. Excellent. Beautiful. Okay. So you all, I don't know where you are with regard to the millions, but it is true. It actually, in every given second, it's 11 million bits of information, which might be really surprising. And let's be real, most of us cannot process all of that consciously. We're only processing about 14 to 60 bits of information. How do we do that? Well, we do something called mental shortcuts, or what we would call our cognitive heuristics. It allows for our brains to make guesses. They're not educated, but guesses in any given situation of this like fast moving world. I have another question for you, and I'd love to hear your reasoning for it. Is seaweed a plant? Yes or no, and why? Go ahead and put it into the chat.
Is what a plant?
Seaweed.
Ah, seaweed. Hmm.
Yes or no, and put it into the chat. Why? It's good to guess, Johnny's. It's good to guess. Okay, any other guesses? Okay, so and so when I'm thinking about if something is a plant, I'm thinking about, someone said it's living. Yes, I'm thinking about the color. Maybe it might be green. I'm thinking, does it have a stalk? Does it have leaves? And so I've categorized in this way. This is what a plant is. In this instance, I'm wrong, and I'll probably still be wrong tomorrow if someone asks me the same question, but seaweed is not a plant. But for most of us, it's just like good enough. And so we're like, yeah, this works, even if it is not accurate. Again, this all happens through categorization, and categorization leads to biases. Biases are at its like very basic level, it has negative, it doesn't have any negative or positive connotation to it. It is just a preference for and against, excuse me, something, someone, or a group of individuals. And so, like, let's just talk about preferences. Let's run through I'm going to say 3 or 4 different things, and you tell me which or who is better. The Lakers or the Clippers? You choose, even if it's not your jam. Go ahead and put it in the chat. Who would you choose, Lakers or the Clippers? Okay. See, people have preferences here. I am a Celtics fan, so you Lakers people, I'm so sorry. So why don't we do something around food? Chips or smart woman, bulls, yeah. Chips or pretzels? Okay, salty. People like salty here. Okay, I got you. What about social media, which I don't have, but like TikTok or Instagram? Hard one. Oh, Ileana, you're hilarious. Yes. And okay, we'll talk about a place to visit. What about New York City or Chicago? Love it. Okay, hometown repping. So these are just general preferences. I think the difference is when we apply it to people, it plays a different kind of role, and possibly when we have these biases that come up, then we can make decisions based on very limited information, which then like impacts how we carry out many things that we do. And we learn this information through social conditioning, and basically what social conditioning is like being exposed to culture, like the culture, the customs, beliefs of any, within any group or like individual. And we learn these things from many avenues. What are ways in which that we learn, we pick up just the culture and the customs and the value systems of people? How do we learn as we grow up? From the moment that we're born, how do we learn those things? Feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself. Oh, okay. Let's see. Yes, parents, spectacular one. Yeah. That is where we learn a lot, being around folks, different people, the environment, modeling behavior, right? And so other places, education, social, like media, faith, based systems. So there's so many different ways. So now we've talked like significantly about biases. And as we had talked before, just it is so important to be thinking about, there's 3 aspects to cultural humility, and biases is one of them. We need to dig very, very deep. And that's that lifelong learning, that's that critical self-reflection, in addition to really taking time to investigate a number of things aside from these biases, of like systemic things that are happening. And we need to understand them. One, I'm going to focus on a couple just because we don't have as much time as I would love. It's only an hour. And then there are some other isms that we can always talk about aside from racism. We'll also briefly touch upon stigma and some of the elements. And I want you to be thinking about some examples that you've come across, that you, if you're a provider that you face, if you're just an individual living and you've been around various things that are happening. What are some of the ways in which people label, stereotype, have prejudice or discriminate? And the other piece about this like lifelong learning and critical self-reflection is that we really need to understand the complexities between and of individualistic, and collectivistic culture. And last but not least, I've said this many, many times, we have to try to figure out how we suspend our own judgments. So now we'll briefly again talk about racism. And this, just dive into this. And I'm curious from you, because there are a few different pieces of this. There's microaggressions, there's like inclusion and diversity, personal prejudices, intergroup tensions. So what is a microaggression? I know many people have heard it, but what is it? Who's willing to unmute themselves or put something into the chat? What's your definition?
I'll add to this one. Microaggressions are the offhanded little comments the society has normalized, and so we've accepted even if they're wrong or hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
So sarcasm is a microaggression for the most part. When people are making snide remarks, those are microaggressions that add up.
Like sarcasm could be sarcasm, but what you're talking about, like that word of like snide, some kind of like insult, if you will, right? Particularly related to someone's like identity. Any other? Thank you. How do you pronounce your name? There's like 3 ways to say it like that. Andrea.
It is Andrea.
Andrea. Okay. Anybody else?
Sharon, is it Sharon or Sharonne? Sorry.
Neither. It's Sharonne, like Yvonne, Sean, and John.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, Sharonne. Anyway, I can't wait to hear. Is there an actual definition for microaggression? Because I've never understood microaggression as the way Andrea described it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm learning. This is great because it's always been one of the things that I'm like, what do people even think a microaggression is?
Yes.
And then of course, understanding that I have no real clue except for like what I understand, which
absolutely
may or may not be right, but I know what I feel and sense and so forth.
Yes, I'm happy to share the definition. And so Daryl Wing-Soo, if you are not familiar with him, he is the person who did not, he's not the person who like coined the term. That was Chester Pearson in the 70s. But Daryl Wing-Soo has really taken this very far with like, in terms of what microaggressions are, describing them in various ways, and micro interventions, how one can respond to them. But microaggressions are everyday, verbal, nonverbal, environmental insults, slights, snubs that could be intentional or unintentional, that basically communicate negative message. They could be demeaning, derogatory, hostile messages to a person who is part of a marginalized group, if they have that marginalized group membership. So that's exactly what it is. And so I'm going to stop sharing this, and we're going to play this video. For whatever reason, it's not working within the system. So, but because I think it can give you a better example of exactly, it's a play on what microaggressions are, but I think it helps people understand it in a different way. So you all tell me again, if you do not hear said video.
For people who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem,
Oh, you're so well spoken.
just imagine instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while,
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland?
sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date,
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
going grocery shopping,
You know, everything happens for a reason.
I'm just buying apples.
commuting to work,
So when are you gonna have a baby?
watching TV,
We have to keep the Redskins' name. It's part of our culture and history.
or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John? Give me shopping advice. I love Cher too.
And getting bit by mosquitoes every goddamn day,
Can I touch your hair?
multiple times a day,
So pretty. Can
Can I touch
your
it,
hair?
please? Can I please?
is fucking annoying. And makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes, which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
It's just a mosquito bite. Who cares? Just another angry black woman.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try this challenging major.
Ow, my dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
He looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
You're all so exotic. Wow.
And by mosquito bites, we mean microaggressions.
So what did you all think about that video, if you haven't seen it before?
So good.
Sorry?
So good.
Oh, yeah.
That's a everyday thing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to ignore, but I know I'm also I'm not immune to it. I do it myself. So I try to catch myself, but sometimes it's not until like days later I realize that I said something that was offensive. So yeah. And mosquito bites, I get tons of those. So, you know, that's been part of my life since I was born.
Yeah, yeah. Johnny, so I really appreciate you sharing like your personal experience, so your lived experience, and you just admitted something I think is really important, which is that you're human and you do them too, and we all do, and I think that this is exactly part of cultural humility, which is saying that I am not perfect, I don't know everything, that I too am a part of this process, and yes, it's not, I don't feel good about it, and I do as well engage in that. Thank you. I really appreciate that vulnerability. Rima, and then we'll move to the next piece before we wrap up.
What is bigger than a mosquito bite? Because I'll give you a personal experience. It was a while ago, back, I don't know, maybe like 30 years ago. Then I was living in Seal Beach and I went to get a book from the library. It's about embroidery in the Middle East. And the guy, it's a young kid, asked me where I'm from. And I said, you know, I'm an Arab, can't you tell? And he said, oh, but you look normal. So I turned around to look at my tail and I said, yes, you're right, I don't have a tail. And he turned red and he said, sorry, I didn't mean it that way. And I rented a house that I had to a Black family and my 4 tires were slashed. And so, although the family, one of them was a doctor, and I told them, wouldn't you prefer to have a doctor living next to you? They said they didn't care. There's lots of closet prejudice. So I'm like, oh my God. So, I mean, that's a much bigger than a mosquito.
I mean, absolutely, which is, I think, the other piece of what the end of the video gets at. You know, some of this can lead to harmful behaviors, death, all that kind of thing. And thank you also for sharing because it's not easy to share those experiences at all. Okay. So I'm recognizing we're close to time. Liliana's going to be on me. I know it. I know it. So let me just quickly and go through a couple of things, which we already started talking about it by people being so willing to share their stories. And so some of the other pieces that we need to be thinking about when we think about cultural humility and when we're walking into spaces are just general stigma elements, labeling, stereotyping, prejudice, Rima just brought up, discrimination also was just brought up. And I have, and you all will get the slides, definitions and some examples for that. But labeling is, I'm going to assign an attribute to a person, place, an event, and you can see the example. Stereotyping takes it to a different level, which is I have this belief about this group. But what happens next is when we get to prejudice and discrimination, that belief from stereotyping can lead to an emotional reaction, which is prejudice in the ways in which that we, might engage. And then from there, the next extent of that is discrimination. It is an actual behavior that we engage in that is in agreement with a belief that we have, and we might defend it, or society might encourage that particular belief. So all of this is really housed within cultural humility, and these are the things we need to be constantly self-reflecting on, constantly self-critiquing, as well as being thinking about like those power imbalances. So the last two pieces are about cultural opportunities and cultural comfort. And really, cultural opportunities are exactly what it sounds like. There are moments when we are with other people, it doesn't matter if it's professionally or personally, where we might have the opportunity to dive a little deeper into their identity. And that is an opportunity for us to explore it. And when we do not acknowledge it, it might seem as though we're avoiding it. We don't see it as important. We might be invalidating it. And so cultural opportunities are those moments where or those markers where we can better understand, especially when we use something like ACEs, we can better understand someone's background and experience. And the next piece of that is how we relate specifically in the moment, how comfortable we are in the moment when these moments come up. And sometimes we're not going to be comfortable, and we recognize that. But the other piece is how can we be open and curious about other people's identities and experiences, because what it does for us, if we are able to work through that and be open and curious, it can push us towards cultural consciousness. And we know that MCO is multicultural orientation. That lens is really healing for many people. In addition, it has benefits not only for the individual who is practicing MCO, it has benefits for the person who's receiving that, who's being embraced for who they are. And when I think about cultural humility in particular, a quote comes up for me, which is Martin Luther King, who says, an individual has not started living until rise above the narrow confines of their individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of humanity. So I know I'm just like on time, up to the top of the hour, and I really want to make sure that I give Ileana the time that she needs. But I just wanted to say thank you all for your time and level of engagement and participating in the various, participating in the various polls that we had. It was very exciting, and also the chat.
Thank you, Sharonne.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was
good.
And
I like the interaction, the engagement along the ride was really great. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that.
And thank you all for participating.